We um, we have the fortune of having Arnold and Drew Zabrocki representing Centricity and the Oath Center at Purdue University. Um, and they are going to blow your mind. They are going to blow your mind with what they're talking about today because these guys are probably two of the smartest people I've ever met. And they continually amaze me with their technology and their ideas. So please welcome to the stage Drew and Aaron. Thank you.
So that comment about brilliance, that's all Aaron, right? So he's going to be the fun guy to listen to. Hey, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. So this is not working. Sorry. That's all right. Hey, it works now. Perfect. Technical. So we're going to roll through some concepts and we're going to show you some things that you've never seen before as some practical applications that really can achieve some very meaningful things for our industry, and they don't require the blockchain. So it's like everything that you haven't heard today. As we go through, this is like if you have ideas or questions, you can totally interact. It will not hurt our feelings. We like questions, so feel free. We'll set it up. You know, everywhere we go, we are connected, right? It doesn't matter. You're in your car, you're at your house. We have these things in our pockets. Everywhere we go, it's connections, connections, connections. Some of the most powerful, influential, and politically aligned organizations that mankind has ever known are that powerful because of the data connections that they have, right? But you know, there's so much talk about what does it mean for traceability, and data connections are the holy grail of traceability, right? How do you know if things come from or where they go or how they're transformed throughout the process if you don't connect that process, right? But in reality, everything is a mess, man. It's just a tangle of information from PDFs and stored file systems to paper records. Everybody has a different traceability system or a different ERP system that they want to work. How do we bring it all together? Right? Well, most people will tell you that it's really easy. Just like put all your stuff on somebody else's cloud, and as long as everything is there, it'll work just fine. But the reality is that's not going to happen. We're not going to choose a single provider, right? So we need to come up with a different way of looking at things, right? We need to think about if data across the supply chain needs to be connected, how do we address those gaps? How do we make those connections come together in a meaningful way that allow us to achieve the goals that we want? Because when you think about within a retail environment or a store, right, you can implement systems and networks and processes within that defined space and it'll work just fine. But when you start going to tier 2, 3, down to tier N suppliers, it gets really messy. Everybody has different systems, different processes. And what we've learned is that oftentimes industry is really good about telling you how to do your job better, having never done that job in the first place, right? That's why the stuff just doesn't work well. So we take a little different approach. Let's start where the product originates and move from the farm forward across the supply chain, connecting from there. Now, as we've been doing this over the past several years, there's a few things that we find that everybody really agrees on. Like, we all have documents, whether they're digital documents or they're PDFs or they're some kind of machine readable document. But you know what? At the end of the day, we just want those documents to fit where they're supposed to go. And when they fit there, things should happen. Like, it should tell me if there's a problem. I shouldn't have to go look for the problem, right? The insight should actually be informative. Instead of having reports that tell me really clearly what I should have done better 6 months ago, it would be nice to know if we could have insights in real time that might be able to affect decisions, and those decisions that could actually make a meaningful difference in our organization. In order to do that, we really need to blend with the people that are using these networks. And as I'm setting up for why I'm telling you this, is a lot of software companies will tell you that there's a solution, it's technical, you've got to make all of these technical things happen. But at the end of the day, it's really about people, right? It's about the processes and how do we connect with where those people are at. If we're going to make a meaningful difference in traceability, whether that be, and not just in traceability, I know that's where we're at today, but and you think about all the reasons why we're connecting around sustainability, around food safety, around food security, reduction of food wastes. These are all elements of a traceable or transparent supply chain. And so if we're going to make a meaningful difference in that place, we have to envision a different way of connecting, because the old ways of connecting are not working. Which is why I'm excited to talk with you about some work that we've been doing with the folks at Purdue University and the Oates Center. Because I met Aaron, I think it's been like 5 years ago, and he gave a talk, which you'll hear, he's an awesome speaker. And I said, this guy really understands that it's not a simple yes or no world, right? So if you think about it, people had been making business connections for years, right? For centuries, we've been doing business. And in the past, we used to look them in the eye, right? We'd shake their hands, we'd make a decision if we trusted this individual, right? Based on how we felt in the moment, based on our peers. Well, some engineer brilliantly changed all of that in about 1995. He says, we'll fix this whole real human connection with an I agree checkbox. We'll put it on all the software, and there'll be something that you just hit I agree, and that will solve all of these meaningful connections that actually allowed businesses and humans to interact and connect for centuries. Well, it's time now to actually go back to the way that we were doing things years ago. And so, some of the slides got a little out of order. We're going to skip on past that. Aaron, you're going to come up in just a second. I'm going to give a quick on what Trellis is. So if you think about it, if it happens, you lose track. We'll get back on track. If in a world where, now, we're going to go ahead and just explain Trellis. I'm not going to recover from that one. All right. So we came together to solve this problem with Trellis. We've got all these different data formats. Everybody has data formats in different systems. None of them really work the same way. We're all typically paying a lot of money for people to manually enter those systems, right? Or enter that data into other systems. And the unfortunate thing is a lot of our time and money is spent just rekeying information, right? But then once we actually have the information and we want to share it, we open up a whole host of other problems. How much do we share? When do we share? Do we provide summary information or detailed information? And hold on, if we're trading information and that information has personally identifiable information, are we trading other people's data? And is there legal implications for this trading of information? There's a whole host of challenges that we need to solve besides just moving the data. This is exactly what Trellis is designed to address. And so if you think about it, there's people that have all of these different systems, all of these different connections that need to be made, and it kind of looks like a little bit of a mess. But if instead of having to create custom integrations and connections for each individual system, if we could use a framework that aligned everybody together, then now that the money that you would spend having to rekey all of that information or put all of that into other systems can now be used to actually improve business processes. You can get insights and analytics, and you could begin to create and retain value from the data as opposed to spending all of the money on integration work. So that's a little bit about what Trellis is. But the cool thing about, and I'm going to let Aaron talk about the Oates Center if you want to come on up. The cool thing about Trellis is as an open source ecosystem hosted at Purdue, you can benefit from it, right? There's no licensing cost. And I'll let Aaron talk about Purdue and the center and share some things with you there.
Thanks, Drew. Hi, everybody. I'm Aaron. I've been referred to about 6 times so far, so I do exist. Here I am. As Drew mentioned, I'm with the Open Ag Technology and Systems Center at Purdue University. My own background, I'm an active farmer. I've got actually corn, soybeans, and about 3,000 head of beef cattle that I raise most of the time. Should be home planting right now, but I'm here instead. But I'm also a co-founder of this Open Ag Technology and Systems Center at Purdue that was really designed to try to bring the power of innovative culture the innovative power of open source culture to agriculture. That we saw the tech industry being able to move so fast at data and information that can move across company boundaries that doesn't happen in the ag space. And the tech companies that are in the ag space tend to have to go on a sales call, in the food space as well, on a sales call that is not only convincing people that you have a great product, but that the thing your product does is even useful to them at all. And what we're trying to get is a place where the farmers know there's value in their data. The processors along the supply chain know there's value in their data, but there's this sort of disconnect between how do I get from the stuff I think is there to an actual system that gives me that value while I'm still doing my regular job. And so that's what I think open source brings to the table. The projects we work on at Oats and the Trellis framework in particular are all about automating the movement of data from wherever it starts to wherever it needs to end up. And so what does a market look like where people are actually craving data? They're asking for those sorts of systems. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a farmer that has a harvester here. Maybe you're even a forward-looking or a progressive farmer, and you've got your harvester connected to the cloud. It's generally the cloud of the OEM that made the actual machine. But that can actually link up to your laptop. You can go to their webpage and look at it and so on. And it feels connected and it feels cool. Until you have another third party that comes in and says, hey, you've got this cloud connection from your machine. I have a little startup that if you could get me the data stream from that, I can actually monitor all your machines and predict when bearings are going to go out or track all of your oil changes, keep track of all the machine health. Is your planter planting optimally? All that kind of stuff. That's our business model. How do you get us that data? And in today's world, it's basically the farmer has to export it on a Monday morning from the website where the harvester connects to and email it over to somebody. And that doesn't work while you're actually doing a logistics-based job like the food supply chain or agriculture. But if the OEM had an API that could actually sync that data to wherever the farmer wanted it to go automatically, like Trellis, now that company can exist. Now they can provide that value and give the farmer another reason to have a cloud connection from their machine up to the cloud. And of course, once he starts having a few different services that need data, the first thing everybody wants is to simplify. And so most farmers then would pick, well, I'm going to have a platform. There's not just one to pick, but I'm going to have a platform that's kind of like data central for me, like my Google Drive. And I want to connect everybody up to my Google Drive so they can get the data that they need to actually deliver the value to me without me exporting stuff from their webpage and rekeying it in somewhere else. Once he's got that in place, now there's this huge market of people that can actually plug in, right? That you can have field sensors that can monitor moisture, temperature, humidity. I saw some cool ones over here from Centaur that could monitor different kinds of gases in your grain bed, stuff like that. And maybe all of that or pieces of that can feed into a benchmarking service that can tell you how you do in comparison to other farmers, right? Or logistics management service that helps you keep track of what's where and what do we need to be doing next. And maybe that pulls some university data that feeds into the guys that make your recommendations on what to spray when and how close the seed should be together and so on. And then of course you've got your service providers like a co-op that might spread fertilizer, might put pesticides on your crops, things like that, that their systems could actually connect to yours and you could automatically know in real time exactly when the truck went out and sprayed and get the as applied map and things like that. And then of course in the age of blockchain now, that the blockchain becomes another destination for this. Let's say you're going to do some certification of some of the stuff that happened on your farm. Maybe you want to automatically record some of that stuff in the chain. This is something that gets built ad hoc by all the companies in this industry that are sort of thriving in an industry that's asking for data. And the abstractions that make this possible are really just four things. All the blue arrows, you need API connections between all of those services and companies. You need the concept of a service. If it's an external thing, you call it a service. If it's in your company, I call it a microservice. You need a storage and caching layer because you have data that has to live in a lot of different places. And so you need some means for that to sit somewhere and point things at it. And then none of that works if you don't have open source because none of those things speak the same language unless you have open source. The open source code is what makes them all actually be able to speak the same language. And so this applied to the food supply chain. We just talked about this one part of it right here, the grower. That was all we just covered. Each of these is equally as complex or more so than the picture I just showed. And yet, each of them are already doing business today. They already transfer product along the blue arrows, right? The certification body creates the audit, sends it to the grower. The grower is going to ship food to the packer. The audit's supposed to, or at least the certification, is supposed to accompany that along the way. Packer's going to the distributor to the buyer. They sort of already trust each other to actually sell products to each other. And so in a sense, one thing we need to do with Trellis is automate, or one thing we've done, is automate the movement of this food safety information from where it starts all the way to the end by creating pipes, automated data pipes between these different companies. Once you have the data flowing in a way that you can just connect from an API and somebody can permission it, then it actually enables a lot of third-party companies to do their job way easier. You can have lots of data analysis companies on the orange arrows that can help take the data you have and make sense of it for you and produce additional value without you having to manually rekey stuff. And so this was actually, we built this last November 2017, I think. So this was actually up live, you can go do it. This represents the dashboard that all of the different companies along the supply chain would see, the auditor, the grower, the packer, the distributor, and the retailer. And because they've created this connection between them, because they all do business together, then it's literally a millisecond between when that guy gets a new cherry audit before it's already made it all the way to the end of the supply chain because he pre-permissioned all these chains with his business partners. Of course, not everything he has goes to every player. He sort of said, well, I sell cherries to this guy and cantaloupes to that guy. And so when I get new cherry stuff, I want new stuff to show up there. So now we're going to move to brand new technology. In fact, the only people that know about this are the people that came to our Oats conference in February, because we're about to publish the paper on this next month. The idea of a private automated certification. This is only possible if you have a standard API framework through which data can move. If you don't have the ability to automate data, you can't make such a thing. But the basic idea is you have private data, you have some form you have to fill out for a regulator, right? So somebody out there, let's say in my case, I have cattle, so I have to fill out things for the Department of Environmental Management. I have a form that says how much nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium I put on each field, for example. And I'm okay releasing that information because I have to anyways. But there's a whole bunch of private data that goes into that I don't want to send on to the regulator. It's the same thing in supply chain. As a company in the supply chain, I have a bunch of private data. I need a certification to flow the other way. And maybe I don't want the traditional manual model to slow me down. So the traditional model is, if this is the IRS on this side, you hire an accountant to come in and look at all your private financial data and fill out the IRS's form. What's possible with Trellis now is that we can actually automate that. We can create a standardized, trusted piece of code that the regulator approves that says, hey, if you can prove to me that you ran this piece of code on your private data, I don't need to see your private data. I only need to see the form that it filled out for me. And therefore, when the code actually runs, it creates a signature that at any time later, the regulator can verify. What's cool about it is that code isn't run by the regulator. I don't have to ship my data from my private spot to the regulator's platform that I don't trust. I can run the code on my data as many times as I want and give them the resulting certification when it's done and leak no additional knowledge. So as long as the guy on this side is okay that it's not leaking any extra information, and the guy on this side is okay that I can prove that the correct code ran, then I can keep my data private and fully automate how I actually produce the certifications. Now, to distinguish this, the way typical blockchain solutions solve this, because they have a similar issue, is that we just make most of this all public, right? We just make it available. We all share the database. We put it all into the database. Everybody in the blockchain network can see it. And then we can verify it's auditable because I can rerun the code on all the data that I can see. And so that kind of defeats this purpose. And what Trellis++, which is what we're calling this, brings to the table is that we actually can do this in a way that computation can run in your own data center, and you don't need a blockchain unless you need a place to have a shared immutable data store, which is what a blockchain will do for you. So the various concepts here that we're sort of introducing are, first, the code itself we're calling an oblivious smart contract, because the regulator on the other side is oblivious to whatever data you fed into the contract. He only knows the result into the code. What makes it work is you can write the contract that can speak the Trellis language to get the data out of your own system ahead of time. And then the form that gets produced is called a private automated certification. It's the thing. It's like a piece of data that their systems can read as well. And so this is really interesting. It's coming out right now, and we're pretty excited because there's been a lot of interest across the entire supply chain for these sorts of things. They sort of let you provide traceability without requiring transparency. We can certify things automatically without actually having to release a bunch of private data to the rest of the world. So I think I'm moving on back to Drew. And we'll take some questions at the end too. Thanks.
Thanks, Aaron. So get ready for some questions. It's good to have it. I think we're running pretty close on time. So I really just wanted to wrap up with an invitation for you all to get some questions going or come see us here in just a moment and talk about like the real benefit of coming together at the Oats Center and being able to collaborate with other industry partners in solving these challenges. we work with a lot of different folks. And some folks are just looking to pilot things, right? They just want to, hey, can we get a proof of concept going where we can take this data and I can work with these really smart people at Purdue, and we can just prove some things out because we want to innovate in our company and we want to bring this innovation internally. So maybe we could use the center as an innovation center. It's a great way to do that, right? Other folks are working with the Oat Center because they want to be part of the community. They benefit from the learnings of others, and they also contribute to the learnings of others, right? So building that community to solve these really complex challenges, and that's one of the benefits of the Oat Center. We have folks that are involved in ventures, right? They're fostering innovation at scale, and they're going to invest in 10 different technologies. They know that maybe one will work. They don't want that deployed capital to go into infrastructure and data systems. They want it to go into actually solving the problems. So by leveraging things like Trellis, you can put in a common data infrastructure. Things will now work properly, and you can put your investment dollars towards the actual problem solved and not the table stakes of the data platform, the interoperability. The cool thing is for those 9 that don't work, you didn't lose your data. You still got all the learnings that you came from those failed projects. So ventures can really benefit from the Oat Center. And of course, anyone looking to scale, right? To bring industry scale requires interoperability, right? So that's where we encourage you to join the Oat Center, to give us a call, to let us know how we can help to solve some of your challenges. We have a couple of examples of other things that we've done that might make sense. Here's our familiar looking people. But maybe we have all these various different suppliers that are coming in, and it's thousands of sub-tier suppliers, and now we have to put it across multiple blockchains, and I don't want to have to write code for every single one, right? That's a great application for Trellis, right? Or maybe I have thousands of audits across dozens of countries, and I need to be able to harmonize all of those audits so that I can get insights. Maybe I would like to know who my best certification bodies are, or my best auditors are. Are they properly calibrated, right? Well, I can't do that if I can't exchange the data. So here's another great way to lower audit costs and improve the efficacy of those programs, whether it be for safe, sustainable, or secure global food supply. This one is getting a lot of popularity, especially with the trace components, the desire to now put my trace information on the blockchain. Do you really want to do that? Well, if you're required by your customer to do that, then you probably have an incentive. But do you want to put all of that investment into just one connection when there's going to be multiple connections? And so here's an application of how Trellis can be used to send your data across multiple blockchains with only one integration. So now you've only had to invest once to connect your data, and it goes where you need it to go. There's a whole host of other innovators are doing it at part of the Oat Center, and private companies that are able to take all of your documents and data from any system in any format, any PDF or shared file drive system, can get automatically converted into a Trellis conformance store in a matter of days. In fact, we did this for Dole Fresh Produce here just last fall, where they had a bunch of PDFs and they were all in this networked file system, and we needed to get that into the blockchain, but we needed to make them machine readable. They needed to get out of a PDF and into something useful. We literally met them on a Friday, and it was like by next week it was done. It's very quick, very rapid. Others are using this to connect digital documents among their suppliers, right? Connecting various systems for audits. Certification, then using that to drive deep learning or machine learning systems. They like to call it AI, but it's really just deep learning, right? So once you have this information in place, you can do cool things with it. And that's really the exciting thing about Oats, is because of the open community, the open source code that you could put to use in your business, you can innovate and you can try these new things out in your business without investing a ton of money or a ton of time, right? So we call it fail forward or fail quickly, right? So you can, we invite you to come and talk with us, and also welcome any questions that you might have for Aaron.
Thank you so much for your presentation. My question is in regards to the supply chain. Have you had any experience with international, or is it mostly domestic that you guys have been working with? And if it has been international, have you guys ran into any walls because there were limitations or more privacy on the other country's side or things like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So most of our work has been with companies here in the States, but they're large global companies, right? And so and also we've been working with Global Gap, right? European company. They have some very strict data privacy laws, which is what I think brought them to us, because we're passionate about data sovereignty. We're passionate about your rights to protect your data and the privacy that's required for that. We haven't ran into any issues or challenges in terms of global scalability. In fact, it's designed for just that.
Yeah, the reason I think that we're not going to run into too many of those is because we're not proposing a platform where you would put your data. The way we actually got started early on with Trellis was in a project that still exists sort of in the row crop space called the Open Ag Data Alliance, and livestock as well, that started from the premise that the owner of the data should control what happens to the data. And the way it normally works is the owner of the software system controls what happens to the data. And so we were building a platform here that said, hey, anybody can be your provider, but the overall API says you have to permission where you want it to go. So in that sense, if you have two companies across an international boundary that have already figured out how to do business with each other, they individually understand those restrictions, and they can build something targeted to that doesn't have to fit the model that fits the entire rest of the world. This just provides the toolkit to automate those kinds of things once those rules are in place. Good question.
Hi, interesting presentation. I've actually been working with this guy for quite some time, thinking about the data exchange, and you actually explained very cool here that the selective data exchange.
Mhm.
I work in the industry where compliance with the government and private sectors data need to be exchanged. So have you heard about GDST? Are you interested to be part of them?
The Global Data Synchronization Network?
No,
Or-
Global Dialogue Traceability.
We haven't heard it, but
I'm not sure which one. you're
Global
talking-
Dialogue Seafood Traceability. Sorry.
oh, the Global Dialogue on Seafood Traceability.
Yes.
that
Okay.
one. Yeah.
Right.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's a wonderful project, right? And Andy kind of roped us in on that last year, right before Hong Kong, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I think there might have been some pictures of dashboards used in that presentation, and we helped to facilitate some of that. And I think it's a wonderful program, and I see that Trellis would be a great tool in the toolkit, right? Just one of the solutions that you guys would be bringing forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's something rather than build from scratch. The other thing is that if we want to engage or somebody want to engage, probably donors, private governments, how to engage with you?
Yeah, great question. So, so two organizations here both have different methods of engagement, right? So, Centricity is an enterprise solutions provider, right? So we have typical engagements where we understand what the goals are, and then we attach a value to that, and we help to make that a reality for you. And then the Oat Center has with an academic university behind it, has a little different engagement model. And let Aaron talk about that.
Yeah, so our center right now is essentially funded by memberships of industry partners that have come together, and they can sit on our board and help direct the open source work that we do. So one of the reasons we work on Trellis is because Drew's company is on our board. And so that helps us work on things that are relevant to the real world, as well as then get engagement and it's the model by which we create this community that a lot of people can have discussions, not just in a vague sense, but around real work. So in other words, we really actually produce code. You can go to our GitHub site and check it out and run it and so on. And so that's the traditional model that we have, but we also can do more, larger scale. We've done a lot of work where we just partner with a few other organizations, write some grants, and it's kind of like a lottery, but the ones that hit, then that's what we get to work on too. So I think we've got a lot of different options to work with you guys. So
Another thing that's been popular is a little bit of a hybrid, where members of industry are trying to solve the same problem, and so they'll pool together. So we're doing this with produce supply, where there's several of the large producers are saying we're all trying to solve the same problem. Why don't we pool together and Centricity would offer like the project management component, but then a lot of the work is being done at Purdue, so it's kind of a hybrid model as well, and that's always an option as well.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll keep. We will in touch.
Great.